Well, folks, it's September 1st, 2018, and Thomas is raring to go with tweets today.
I'm ready, Betsy. Such an honor.
Yes, and the first one is actually a quote from Alan Dershowitz. It says, quote, "I think today what has happened is that news reporting has become part of the adversary system," close quote. And then Donald Trump continues to tweet, "It has become tainted and corrupt."
That is for sure. Tainted and corrupt. Those are nice words. I would call it more something like fascism and corporatocracy that has gutted America. I'd also add to what Alan has said here, the adversary system. Oh, yes. The adversary system, the news reporting. Notice he says news reporting. He doesn't qualify it. Basically all news reporting, if it isn't alternative journalists, citizen journalists doing their best to try to bring you the truth. What are you finding? Basically, they all read the same script from Avid. So it is a system. He's pointing out it's a system. If it's a system, then it's racketeering. Then it needs antitrust action. Then it's a monopoly that needs to be busted up. And it would be illegal because they would be perpetrating lies that they knew were lies. So this is the news media actually is the opposition party. It is the resistance. And remember that when they do opposition research against Trump with this dossier, that all of that, those were donations to the Democrat Party, or the Demon Rat Party, as I like to call it. And it was election meddling. So from the beginning, even the opposition research that was done needs to be considered as donations to that party. And it needs to be clear and above board and not lying. And that's the reason that Alan can be quite correct in saying that it is an entire system. It was a system of election fraud, and it was a system that turned into an attempt to unseat a duly elected president. In other words, a coup d'etat. So the adversary system, it is in fact a coup d'etat.
Thomas, we've reported on this quite a bit. We have, our listeners understand what Avid does. They also understand the connections that Dianne Feinstein has with Avid. Why do you think Trump still has to talk in code? Why can't he just call it out for what it is?
Because the mainstream media crucifies him with everything that he says. Notice that the meeting with, which we're going to talk about in one of the tweets, he made an off-the-record remark, and they printed it, and they sent it to Canada, and they interrupted what should be called a national security violation because, in fact, they made an agreement with the sitting president that they would not take an off-the-record remark, and they used it to interrupt national security issues, which are trade deals. Trade deals, economic deals, are national security, and they're messing with them, and they need to leave Trump alone, let him do the deals, because they've shown they are infinitely bad at deals.
But if they leave him alone to do his deals, the globalists are going to lose. They can't.
The globalists will lose. That's correct, Betsy. And we can only hope that it will continue in this way, because they are losing very, very, very poorly, very bad.
And you know, the sad thing is a lot of those demon rat congressmen, that include senators on that, the place that they are going for their news is the very place that is this adversary system. So how are they to even know truth? And the reason I bring this up is that Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg is due into the Senate Intelligence Committee, which is really corrupt, for some questioning. Now, they're not going to ask her tough questions because maybe they don't even know the question to ask. They haven't done the research, or they're just plain obscuring truth.
Larry Sumner's doppelganger is Sheryl Sandberg. And yes, they are at the edge of obscuring truth. They are a huge part of falsehood politics in the post-truth era that we're in. He was at the U.S. Treasury. He was in the World Bank. He was at Harvard.
No, we're talking about Larry Summers.
Larry Summers. And she was right there with him the entire time. You can't get any more corrupt than those two, and yet, you hardly hear a word about them. Yet they still, to this day, continue to manipulate huge amounts of our economy, essentially.
And as Sheryl Sandberg and Larry Summers were busy creating and setting up the infrastructure for this police state, the stolen technology of Leader Technologies, Mark Zuckerberg was 8 years old. So don't tell me that Mark Zuckerberg invented diddly squat. Now, Moving on. The next tweet is a quote from Tom Fitton of Judicial Watch. It's in 2 tweets, but I'm going to read them all together. Report. There were no FISA hearings held over spy documents. Quote, it is astonishing that the FISA courts couldn't hold hearings on spy warrants targeting Donald Trump. It isn't about Carter Page. It's about the Trump campaign. You've got corruption at the DOJ and FBI. The leadership of the DOJ and FBI are completely out to lunch in terms of exposing and holding those accountable who are responsible for that corruption.
Well, we love Tom Fitton. We love the fact that their FOIA requests, when they get answered, reveal more than the DOJ reveals to us, and actually does more research than the DOJ and the FBI put together. So thank you so much, Tom. We said it from the beginning. We'll pat ourselves on the back. I said it before the conclave then agreed with me, but it was true that there never was a single FISA request ever that went before a hearing before the FISA court.
And you know, I remember the day that you said there was no FISA hearing, and people just stormed on us and said, what are you, crazy? No, we knew it all along.
And the reason is because we saw Admiral Rogers demand that they close up the loophole that Obama opened where raw data could be used from the NSA by anybody. And then they were using that. They didn't need to get FISA warrants. And as we pointed out, the Crossfire Hurricane, Nunes has pointed out that there was never any intelligence that set John Brennan, Mad Dog Brennan, on, that would be Rabid Dog Brennan.
You mean treasonous traitor Muslim Brennan? That Brennan?
Yes, the communist, yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. He didn't even have any intelligence that started basically what is the most protected thing in America. When you have a counterintelligence operation, you first have to have intelligence. And the intelligence has to tell you that an enemy of our country is in fact working against us. And you have to have evidence, because it is illegal to have a counterintelligence operation against someone that is, say, in the Five Eyes, or say is a friend of ours, a country that's a friend of ours, or people who don't live here that and live in other countries who are our friends. We're not supposed to go after everybody as our enemy. And if you do, you're supposed to have a FISA warrant, either an international one or a domestic one. Oh, I don't know, maybe 1,000 times I've said this. The Inspector General's investigation into the FISA court demonstrated that it was 100% abused, and that Comey, in the entire time, and I said this, and I'll say it again, and I'll keep repeating it, Comey never put in one single FISA application or had a FISA hearing for a domestic FISA request. Not even, and the reason they waited till October 26th to put in that FISA application, which didn't go to a hearing, it simply was rubber stamped. And remember, Rod Rosenstein said he didn't read the ones he signed. And they were all based upon evidence that was supposed to be 100% sure, because it was supposed to be for the Carter Page, which was the first one that Comey had put in. And I kept saying, why would Comey put in a FISA request in October when that was because he had to wait for the Inspector General's report to end? And it was the insurance package. They never expected Trump to be elected. It was the insurance package. It was the thing they had on the back burner that were part of the 28 treasonous crimes of Comey that all led up to needing the dossier. And I say it again, please read the dossier. The other day, just today, I was reading some crazy mainstream media person saying, there's evidence in the dossier. Not if you ever read it.
Well, you're quoting the mainstream media, and they are just talking head idiots.
They're completely stupid. That report should be released to everyone as an example of how stupid the intelligence agencies are, to John McCain especially, to have ever believed for one moment that that dossier had a speck of truth in it or was in fact in any way a piece of intelligence. So Nunes said there was no intelligence for the Carter Page, for the George Papadopoulos FBI counterintelligence and CIA counterintelligence operation intergroup working that was directed by Peter Strzok. Now, let me point something out. Peter Strzok is not fired. He's still working for the CIA. Peter Strzok still, when he went to work with Robert Mueller, when his little committee transformed into its 12th different iteration, He had the ability to write what are called national security letters. We harped on this before. He had the right to manipulate the FISA court. Believe that or not. He had the right to bring things before a FISA court without a hearing. These were his powers because he was a section chief running a CIA counterintelligence operation, national security, highest level, based on no intelligence except for the fact that John Brennan wanted to go after Trump because he loved Hillary Clinton. And the entire Democratic D.C., they might as well call it the D stands for Democrat City, D.C., Washington Democrat City, is always for the Democrats because that's where there's a lot more looseness, where they can run their black ops projects without getting in any trouble, where they can have all the money that they want.
Well, I'm going to push back with you, Thomas. It's not Democrats alone. We have a whole bunch of Republicans just as stinky as the rest of them. Look at the Senate Intelligence Committee and let's watch those Republicans ask Sheryl Sandberg some really good questions that you can find in our citizen intelligence reports. But you won't, because they're all globalists. They're all senior executive service thugs that are trying to overthrow the United States government.
That is true. And I'm speaking most specifically about the election meddling, but in fact, the corruption is on both sides.
Are you kidding? It's on both sides.
It's so thick, it's
the
unbelievable.
Election rigging? Well, then let's talk about Mitt Romney and his ownership of these election rigging voting machines. You cannot say it's Democrats or Republicans. It's both of them, and they're dirty.
Well, somebody should have stood up and read this dossier into the record in either the House or the Senate so that the ridiculousness of it could be put to an end. Because literally, you cannot read this and believe it. It is impossible. It was never meant to be seen by anyone. It was never meant to be released. It was only propaganda. Christopher Steele went too far. Well, it was actually John McCain who went too far and made copies available to unworthy news agencies who simply printed it. That was because Clapper and Comey had already come out and made references to it and said that they'd given a one-page executive review of the dossier to the president and to Obama and made a report to both of them, and therefore it was public knowledge, so therefore it could come out wrong. When it came out, anybody who read it would have known that it was fake. So what was this when he says it's not about Carter Page? It wasn't about Carter Page. The dossier wasn't about Carter Page. It wasn't about Michael Cohen. It wasn't about George Papadopoulos. It wasn't about the people who were mentioned in it. Excuse me, Papadopoulos was part of the frame-up, but it was the people in there, like Alexei Gubarev and the three bank heads of Alpha Bank, who are now suing and basically doing a very good job beating Christopher Steele, both in America and in British courts. It was about, the dossier was about using Carter Page, as James Clapper said, as an informant sent in to spy on the Trump team to see if Russia was affecting them so that Clapper and Obama and all of his federal team could come in and protect Trump from those mean Russians, when in fact it was the Russians working through Dmitry Alperovitch and Natalia Veselnitskaya and Rinat Akhmetsnak and all these people who were basically friends of Hillary Clinton. Remember that. The Russians that were being used were friends of Hillary Clinton. And the number one Russian asset of the FBI at the time was Carter Page. So with the second part of this tweet, the great tweets from the stable genius Donald Trump, our president, the best president so far that we've ever had, if you just look at the polls that have been done. And do not under any circumstances ever listen to people like the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, CNN, NBC, CBS, ABC. Holy crap. I looked for just a minute at one of their sites, and it was unbelievable, the lies. Every single thing they say is premised in lie. So, going back to the FISA court, remember, there was the big issue that when the Inspector General's report came out and said, Comey, you have not filed one single FISA request, which is impossible. That means that all of his surveillance was so basically pervasive on everyone that he was surveilling that he didn't ever need to file to get a FISA warrant to wiretap anyone or to surveil anybody. He just did what he wanted. Same thing with John Brennan in the CIA. And the NSA was, of course, tapping everybody. As we know, Clapper lied about it over and over. And he lies back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Now, I don't know what he says today, whether we are 100% under surveillance or whether we aren't, according to him. But hopefully he won't have a top-secret security clearance much longer so that he would have any knowledge of that.
Well, all of their security clearances, this whole bunch, it needs to be gone. And then I have to ask you, well, what about Mueller? I mean, this clearly shows that this thing is nothing. So what is he going to do?
Oh, he's just there for election meddling. He's there to stop the midterms from going in the direction of MAGA. And that's his job. That was always his job. His job was to make sure that Hillary Clinton became the president, and he's still trying to do that at this moment as we speak. Now, going back, the FISA court Inspector General report stated that it was in the worst condition it could possibly be in, and basically that it should be closed down. But they didn't close it down. Trump said, no, I'm taking care of that. Now, what did he mean by that? There's no more FISA warrants being given out for nonsense at this point because they're all being watched. And now, because of what Tom Fenton and Judicial Watch just brought out, we know that there were no hearings. So in other words, it was rubber stamped when they wanted it, which they didn't even want most of the time because they just did it anyway. But with Carter Page's FISA warrant, Title I, which Comey had to swear that he had 100% proof that Carter Page was a Russian spy to get that warrant. Why? Because that was going to be the thing to take down Trump when they saw that he was going to be elected. They thought they could take him down by the other 28 treasonous crimes of Comey and everything John Brennan was doing and everything the State Department was doing and the Department of Justice. And they all were working overtime to take Trump down, to attack Trump, to destroy him, to stop a free election in America, and to put Hillary Clinton, one of the biggest criminals, political criminals in maybe anybody's history, anywhere, certainly U.S. history, to stop her. That's what we needed to do. But what she was trying to do, of course, was simply to annihilate Trump. What Trump was trying to do was simply be honest. And that's the reason that they can't get him on anything, because there's nothing to get him on. So there's no more propaganda allowed in America. There's no more surveillance allowed in America, and it is not by surprise that we now see that the big people who are surveilling us, Facebook, Google, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, all those people who stole their technology from Leader Technologies through the IBM Eclipse Foundation, all of them are having the brakes put on. And Trump mentioned that dirty word that can bring them all down, antitrust.
Before you go into that subject, let me ask you, where would you say the actual creation point of all this is? Is it with Brennan or was it with Hillary Clinton? Who was the one that put the ball into action with this dossier and with everything you described?
That would be the Democratic National Committee, John Podesta, Hillary Clinton, Donna Brazile working directly for George Soros. That would mean Cody Shearer. That is... what's his name?
So what are they?
Blumenthal.
So they're planning this in the DNC, and they pick up the phone and they call John, their buddy Brennan, and said, "Hey, we need your help here."
No, Comey got involved. Comey was told, the FBI was told that Hillary had been breached in April of 2015, and that part of the story is true. So they kept coming to the DNC saying, "Can we help? Can we help?" And they said, "No, you can't, because we have top secret stuff on here. The Soros won't let us show you because it's criminal." And so the DNC, so Hillary kept refusing help from the FBI. Comey kept saying, let us help, let us help, let us help. And in the end, they didn't let them help. They ran it through the Atlantic Council. So it was all the DNC, and that was because they realized that they had been, in fact, set up from the beginning, and that they had been, that the Hillary server for pay-to-play had been found out.
You mean for racketeering?
Yes, for racketeering. Imran Awan had been found out. Brian Pagliano had been found out. So it was coming unglued, and so they had to create this cover. They had to create a
So this is when Dmitry Alperovitch comes in and puts in his fancy bear footprints. That's kind of where it starts?
I believe that he probably started in the spring of 2015, believe it or not. And then in December of 2015 is when he planted the Russian footprints, and then later in the spring of 2016 is when they say that it all happened and they admit it. But that's not true. And remember, he did not stop the ability to hack the DNC. They would not let him do anything to that set those servers because he put Falcon on it, his proprietary system for basically stopping viruses, but he couldn't stop the bots that were put there. Highly likely the bots that were sending courtesy emails, every single email coming and going was being sent a courtesy copy to the Chinese and to others. That had to have been done inside. That was someone working directly on the computer. That would have been Brian Pagliano. That would have been Imran Awan.
Okay, back to antitrust.
He mentioned antitrust in relationship to the squelching of free speech and the complete surveillance of all Americans on the internet. And so he has used the word now antitrust. That was also part of the thing that was leaked in the recent conversation that Trump had where he made off-the-record remarks. And so he mentioned antitrust, and we said it's going to happen any minute, racketeering, antitrust, anti-monopoly action, and he can do so much. We've gone over this and outlined this, but Trump can take this down, but he's letting it all be revealed for what it is, just like he's letting the FISA court be revealed for what it is.
Okay, but I do have to ask you, though, because this sounds like it might tie into this new research that you and the team are working on, the Conclave, and that is this Federal Bridges program. When you say that everything is all connected to everything, can you give people a little teaser of what you're finding out in this program?
Well, we were told that if we first search Serco, that we'd find out the British connection to the Queen, and then we should search the Crown agents, and we'd find out how they siphon money off U.S. aid and OPEC and all these U.S. giveaway money agencies, and the way it goes directly into the pocket of members of the British Privy Council who work directly with the Queen. Geoffrey Patty,
Richard Dearlove, Malik Brown.
All of these people have
even Conrad Black up there in Canada.
Tremendous power. So then we found out in doing the research that there was a company called Agilent that was created by Richard C. Walker that put a patent into place quite a few years ago that was basically explains how they intend to have aggressive remote control of everything that moves: buses, cars, motorcycles, humans, everything. They have to be able to remote control. So they created what we call the Richard C. Walker patent, the Internet of Things. We have now found out, through the same sources that led us in these other directions, that if we really want to find where the rich people like Cheney and like Brzezinski and Kissinger, where they go to retire to make money for doing nothing, that would be this obscure group called the Federal Bridge Certification Authority. So we started researching that and couldn't get anywhere with it. But then one of our great researchers, James, who points us in great directions and has just revealed some amazing things recently had a good article too on Truth News Headlines. He pointed us in the direction of this, saying that it is not a bridge, they are electronic bridges. In other words, it's the networking system that controls everything that gives you digital trust. In other words, your single sign-on, your bank card, you're getting gas, anything you do that is electronic has to go through a trust system. And you have to pay if you're going to be part of that trust system. And they call it the Federal Bridge Certification Authority. It is not federal. It has nothing to do with bridges. You don't get any certification, and they have no authority. It seems as if they're just a tax booth, a toll booth that is set in between so that every time you do something electronically, they either approve it or don't, and you or someone that you work through the card company that you're using the card for, or whatever system you're using to get on the internet or whatever, somebody's paying them so that PKIs can be checked. These are identification numbers. And if they're not checked, then you can't trust anybody on the internet. So we are finding out now that there is an ultimate group that controls Richard C. Walker's Internet of Things patent, and we're getting closer to the heart of that. And so we have to thank those who put us onto that.
Okay, I know we're going to hear more about it, but, we have to drop a little bit of information now so people can have something to hang their hat on when you finally get there with your report. The next tweet is a quote from Dan Bongino, and I'm going to read both of those tweets together. You have a fake dossier gathered by Steele, paid by the Clinton team to get information on Trump. The dossier is fake. Nothing in it has been verified. It then filters into our American court system in order to spy on Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton's political opponent, Donald Trump. And now we find out that there wasn't even a hearing, that Donald Trump's Fourth Amendment right to privacy was signed away. And someone in there is swearing that this stuff is true, when it isn't. This is a scandal, a police state. Close quote. And when you answer, I want to ask you about this Judge Collier. What's she doing? Isn't she responsible for what goes on in her court?
She's as crooked as all the rest of them, but then you'd have to be crooked to be in a FISA court. That Judge Contreras was a FISA court judge, and he sat on the impaneled grand jury to hear evidence about these fake FISAs. And yet he never once said, was there a hearing? And by the way, why did you guys get a FISA when the FBI never gets FISAs? You just do it illegally. I mean, why does that Judge Contreras, then he was ordered from the top to step down after Michael Flynn and all of them had gone through that special counsel investigation and before that grand jury. So the corruption in the fake justice system is astounding. There is actually no end to it. Let's go to this thing, this tweet here. First off, most important thing, police state. Yes, it's about time somebody said it. The FBI, CIA, NSA, all State Department, DOJ,
Jeff Sessions, Christopher Wray, Rodenstein, let's name them. They're all part of the police state. They're the senior executive service, the SS.
And the top of all the intelligence agencies, all 17 of them, and the White House, were all part of a police state to try to stop Donald Trump from bringing back the Republic and the Constitutional Republic of America. And that's really, this was a war, folks, and it's still a war, and it's still going on. The important point here in this tweet is Dan is right. There was no hearing. That is shocking, because each time that you put in this FISA warrant, you have to have conclusive, absolute proof. So in the first instance, in October 6th of 2016, what was their absolute proof? That was the dossier. Now you have some people, some in the intelligence community, saying, yes, the dossier was the entire thing used to get the FISA warrant, and others say we didn't use it at all. They lie so much. That's because Brennan was talking about getting an international FISA warrant for his surveillance and for his counterintelligence operation against George Papadopoulos, Sam Clovis, using Stephen Halper, Dear Love, and that whole group there. So there were two things going on at the same time. So that corruption that was happening, when they say gathered by Steele, remember, it's not Steele who gathered it all. He was a lazy person. He did very little of it. Nellie Orr, Glenn Simpson wrote a major part of it. They added Cody Shearer's collection. They added the collection of fake things that Comey was able to derive from all of his 28 treasonous actions. Then they added what Alexandra Chalupa could add. Then they added what this new person in Ukraine, which they just found out, who is an anti-Trumper, who gave all kinds of information for the dossier. I forget their name. It's one of these very complicated Ukrainian names. But basically, they have nailed it down to exactly who those people were. And it wasn't just Christopher Steele. So we need to stop saying that. We need to say Christopher Steele and his Russian and foreign influences. And when you say Ukraine, you're saying something much worse than Russia. Okay, you're saying the worst fascist out there right now, basically. That's why they just blew up the prime minister of Donetsk, the rebel country, basically, that separated from Ukraine. So what happened? They just blow up the people they don't like. That's what Ukraine does. And they give Joe Biden and Lindsey Graham medals, and they give their children, well, not Lindsey Graham's children, but they give Joe Biden's son billion-dollar deals. They give John Kerry's son billion-dollar deals in Ukraine, in China, our biggest enemies. Isn't that funny? So what we're talking about is this is a police state working against us in a war against us. And this isn't some little joke of information war, info wars. No, this is people's lives on the line. We now know that Hillary's BlackBerry was compromised the entire time she was the Secretary of the State, which probably resulted in at least some of the dozen or so Chinese American spies that were either killed or put in prison and tortured to death during her time. So China was spying on us the entire time, especially through Hillary's BlackBerry, because every single message she made, a courtesy copy, was sent to the Chinese. Isn't that nice? So what I want you to do, read the dossier. We have it linked in one of the Truth News headlines, have in fact put together not only the intelligence reports, but you can connect directly to that dossier. Read it. You need to read it. It is a historic document. And if you do not laugh after the first sentence, then you're not reading it as the joke that it was supposed to be, because it was supposed to be a joke. It's childish garbage. I want you to read it, and then there will be no more.
No, it wasn't supposed to be a joke. Nobody was supposed to catch them do it. That's how sloppy they are. And talk about uncreative. It had to come from the mind of someone. Okay, what is something really bad that we can do? It's probably what John Brennan does when he goes and meets hookers over in Russia. And so that's the limit of their creativity.
Podesta, just by looking at the pictures on his wall, is obviously a very sick person sexually. Hillary Clinton, do we need to enumerate all of the accusations of Hillary's sexual, basically crimes, and Bill, her husband's crimes, and she covered up his crimes?
Bill Clinton is a rapist. Let's not forget that. Now, let's get on to Canada. A tweet that I left behind, but we're not going to couple it with the last three, is I love Canada, but they've taken advantage of our country for many years, followed by, there is no political necessity to keep Canada in the new NAFTA deal. If we don't make a fair deal for the U.S. after decades of abuse, Canada will be out. Congress should not interfere with these negotiations, or I will simply terminate NAFTA entirely and we'll be far better off.
Congress can't do deals. They're stupid. NAFTA cost us between $3 to $5 trillion and almost our nation. We were going to become one nation under Canada, Mexico, and America. That was the plan. Read it. That's why there was to be the superhighway that was to go from Mexico directly to Canada. Now, first off, Canada. Canada's a joke. Canada is part of the UK, part of the Commonwealth. They don't even have a nation. They're told what to do.
Well, Justin Trudeau, when he took his office, he gives his allegiance to the Queen. So I've always said that this thing with NAFTA is more than just about Canada. It's also putting the United Kingdom, the Queen, and the Privy Council on notice that we're no longer going to be beholden to them.
We have cities that are bigger than all the people in Canada, okay? They lose. He is an idiot. He doesn't know what a tariff is.
Who?
Trudeau is an idiot. He doesn't know what a tariff is. He made that perfectly clear during the G7 when he said, well, a tariff, when they raise the rate, well, if you raise it or we raise it on, and then he never said the word tariff again because he doesn't know what a subsidy is, he doesn't know what a tariff is, and he is nothing more than a vampire who is continuing the British East India Company's imperialism. He is a joke. He is pathetic. And doing a deal with him is embarrassing. It's like stealing somebody's milk money, okay? It is so pathetic because he doesn't even know what the history is. And so what we need to do is get out of that deal, get out of NAFTA. And Trump couldn't just get out of NAFTA. He couldn't just break it. He had to have the deal with Mexico. Therefore, there's been an adjustment to it. He can change the name. He can change the tenets of the agreement. You can't just go and just kill things that are already existing. So it's going to be a few months before he'll be able to put 25% tariffs on the cars. That will break the back of Canada. Between now and then, guaranteed, Trudeau will be, as he was calling Trump the minute Trump was off of that press release when he was talking to the presidents of Mexico, current and past, and Trudeau called immediately and begged and begged and begged. But Trudeau can't do any deals. He has no clue. He has no idea how to do an economic deal, let alone to stand up to Trump. So, What is really going on here? 3 to 5 trillion was lost in the NAFTA. Thank you. So can we please give Mr. President the 26 billion he needs to build the wall? Because one way or the other, it's going to come out of the NAFTA deal. He just saved us trillions of dollars, okay? So we should give him what he wants, because then that will make things better. First off, let's ask the question, why were we in deals that were parasitic? Why did we allow vampires to come along and basically consider us a socialist nation to help other nations? We should have trade deals with no tariffs, no barriers, no subsidies, with none of the value-added nonsense, and it should be straight up. Why would there be any reason that we wouldn't be on a level playing field? Why would we subsidize any other nation?
Because the globalists have infiltrated our government with the Senior Executive Service, the Serco, and the politicians. And their goal was to overthrow America and make it a part of this globalist structure. Thank goodness patriots woke up in time to get to the polls to get Trump in office. And now the next step is to make sure that everyone that Donald Trump recommends in his tweets to be voted for in the midterms, that we patriots do that so we can give him the team he needs to get this place cleaned up once and for all.
For George Soros' plan to be effective, he has to have chaos in America economically. He has been busted. He lost $1 billion on the bet of Trump, and he lost $1 billion the next day. He spent $2 billion to get Hillary elected. He lost. Eric Schmidt spent $1.5 billion, and he lost. And those tech companies gave their top people in a rotating system where they said it wasn't a donation. The people took time off or vacation to go work at the White House for Hillary Clinton.
Are you kidding? We've seen time and time again where they were paid by Facebook or one of the tech companies while they were on the payroll of the United States government.
And Hillary paid a Russian, Savelenko, to write a program to win the election, so that it would be even an enhancement of the previous one. So what are we talking about? George Soros, open society, open for economic terrorism. That's what he is. He's an economic terrorist. He is a criminal. And if we could stop George Soros, we would stop so much. And all these issues of the 159 George Soros-supported groups that are in fact attacking free speech in America, we could take them back to the initial donations, $18 billion from George Soros, collect all that money, and then do what Obama did with it. He would take money from one thing that he would rip off one section of the federal government and put it into a fund and then use it for whatever he wanted. So we need to just take some of the money we're getting from NAFTA, take some of the money we're going to get from the 25% increase on the cars tariffs for Canada, take some of the money we're getting from NATO that is poured in, take some of the money from the climate control nonsense, $5 trillion he saved us, build the border, eradicate SES, and get rid of the U.S. Federal Reserve.
And let's get right with social media. Let's get a check to Leader Technologies and put Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Google in the place where they're supposed to be. Simply a utility that the United States citizens and citizens around the world can use without the judgment of these thugs telling us what's okay or not okay to say or to post.
Listeners, you are the judge in the court of public opinion. Vote with your wallet. Vote with who you listen to, what you turn on, what you turn off. And make your decisions and realize that these are very serious decisions and that it is our job as citizen journalists to take the truth and to spread it far and wide, like the Paul Revere and John Dawes spreading the call for the Minutemen. We are all Minutemen and Minutewomen, and we are being called on to defend our republic in our votes, but also in standing up, and also lawsuits that can be brought, in supporting things like Judicial Watch, and supporting organizations that you believe bring you the truth. This is a serious war. This is not some little digital data info war, and this isn't somebody just screaming nonsense. This is screaming the truth, and the truth is President Trump and his tweets are the news, and the rest is not. That is fake news or very fake news. So get on board, Vote for MAGA, exactly as Betsy's just said. Every MAGA candidate, we need to show the red tsunami in the midterms, because otherwise it's impeachment for Trump that they want. And as Al Green was just calling, one of the biggest criminals in the Congress, Al Green called for impeachment. He put the first impeachment on the Congress floor. He's trying to put it on the floor again. He says, because of Kavanaugh's record, we don't need a crime to impeach the president. So let's impeach him. We'll make up a crime as we go along, exactly as Robert Mueller's special counsel investigation has done. There was never and is never and never can be a crime of conspiracy to collude.
And here we're getting ready to put a Supreme Court justice on the bench who's already written a 132-page memo on how you can impeach a president because of truth and lies.
And yet, Kavanaugh was part of Ken Starr's independent counsel, and guess what? They impeached Bill Clinton, and they should have put him in jail, but he stayed in office. They took away his law license, and they gave him a little fine, and he cost America hundreds of millions of dollars with that investigation, just like right now. Last we heard, it was over $20 million that has been spent by the Mueller investigation. Now, at this time, if it's keeping on the same pace, it should be about $30 million for a fake attempt to have a coup d'etat on a duly elected president in the United States of America. It is unbelievable. It is unprecedented. You are in unprecedented times. Make sure to wake up and participate.